Welcome to the Luxury Rental Doctor Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Gainsbrugh, and today we have a fantastic guest who is making huge waves in the world of real estate investing, namely short-term and midterm rentals. And as you all know, we are always focusing on the ROE, return on energy. So we're going to be focusing on midterm rentals specifically. Joining us today is the amazing Katie Lyon, Marketing Director for Furnished Finder and KeyCheck. She is also the co-host of the Landlord Diaries Podcast. Now, Katie's had over a decade of experience in real estate investing and marketing, and she has perfected the art of combining short-term and midterm rental strategies. She is here, guys. I'm so excited. She is here to share her insights on how you all, busy medical professionals and professionals at large, can successfully dive into real estate investing. So we are super excited to have you here. Katie, I would love for you to dive in and just kind of introduce yourself to the people in your own words.
My name is Katie Lyon. I live in the Denver area. I work full time for Furnished Finder, but my family and I also have a portfolio of properties. So we currently have 13 properties. We just sold one. So we have 13 rental properties. 12 of them are midterm rentals, and they are in 3 different states. And we're just like growing as fast as we can and learning as fast as we can and doing all things midterm.
I love that. So, if we could take a step back now, Katie, I know you, of course, from Furnish Finder. I had the great opportunity to attend several conferences with you. We are just in the
Yeah.
green room talking about attending Bigger Pockets Con together. We attended Jesse Vasquez's MTR Summit. Well, Furnish Finder and Jesse Vasquez. I know you guys
Yeah. Yeah.
collaborated on that, which was amazing. And I would love for you, though, to share a little bit about your journey and what inspired you to get started with real estate investing.
Yeah. Before I came to Furnish Finder, I worked for a private commercial real estate investment firm in Denver. So I learned a lot about commercial real estate investment, and I learned the power of it, how it can help you build long term wealth, even build cash flow. And just I learned a lot about all of those different aspects, and just the power of real estate. But it always felt not quite attainable. We were working with
Mm.
funds, and more accredited investors and just things on a larger scale, even though it was a small firm. It's just still like much more than you can do as an individual. So then I ended up working at Furnished Finder, and my family and I had always been interested in real estate. Our last home. Oh God, hang on.
I'm sorry
Okay.
to bore you to death, woman.
No, I'm boring myself. I'm the one talking.
I'm dead. I'm so
Okay.
dead.
Okay, so our last home when we moved out of it, long story short, we were building our new home, and the only way that we could avoid living in an apartment for like 9, 10, 12 months, the whole time they were building this house, is if we were to rent out our old house. If you were gonna put it on the market, you had to show that it was on the market within 7 days of signing the contract to build the new house. The only loophole we found for that was if you were to lease it out, you just had to show a signed lease 7 days within closing. So essentially, you
Oh.
had the whole time the house was being built to get your ducks in a row. And we were like, that's what we want. We don't want to live in apartments. We've got kids, we've got pets. Like, we didn't want to double move. So we signed up for that. Everybody thought we were crazy. I thought we were a little bit crazy, but I knew we could do it. So okay. Girl, I am struggling today. Okay,
Oh my
so
goodness.
we did it. It was fantastic. We ended up getting the best tenants in the world. Everything
Mm.
went super, super smooth. Like, we heard from them like twice a year. We ended up renting that house out for 3 years. Then we sold it just because we wanted to avoid the capital gains tax, so we wanted to fit within that time frame. But
Yep.
then I started working at Furnished Finder, and I quickly learned about midterms and how
Mm.
there's this sweet spot where you can have so much more cash flow than a long-term
Yes.
rental, but
Yes.
it's so much less work than a short term. So,
Oh my goodness.
initially, we were, like, drawn to the short term because we were like, "Well, if we're gonna do this, let's go all out. Let's get the most cash flow we can." But then we realized, like, That's a lot of work, a lot of turnover, a lot of wear and tear, and just with our W-2 jobs, it just was not in the cards. So, once we discovered midterms, like, we went all in and started doing as many as we could as fast as we could.
Okay, I absolutely love this. So for those who are just tuning in, Katie, and they're like, okay, I understood kind of her story up to the point where she was talking about long-term rentals rather. So for those who say, yeah, I totally get long-term rentals, you rent out a
Yep.
property for a year and it's unfurnished, I'm good to go. Could you please define midterm rentals and even
Yeah.
short-term rentals for those who are just tuning in, they're like, I'm not quite sure what all of these terms mean.
Yeah, that's a good point because and I do this all the time because in my mind, I'm like, I lived this all day, every day, especially because I work at Furnished Finder full time. So, like,
Same.
I'm living this all day. I forget that not everybody is like that. So midterms is 30 days and up and it's furnished. And you're looking for travelers like nurses, displaced families,
Mhm.
corporate travelers, people that are relocating, anything like that. Short term is anything less than 30 days. So that's your typical Airbnb,
Yep.
Verbo, those types of vacation travelers or traveling typically for some sort of leisure.
Yeah.
So the midterm worked really well for us, still does work really well for us because just there's that difference in tenant type
Yeah.
and the amount that we're able to responsibly charge for
Yep.
rent, where these people feel like they're still getting a good value and a good price, but
Yeah.
we're able to make it, a profitable investment. It works.
Absolutely. So if we could rewind even further back a little bit, I was really intrigued, and I don't think I knew this about you that you worked in the commercial real estate funds, probably some
Yep.
syndications in that
Yep.
realm. Could we unpack that for a second? Because you're in the thick of it. You're literally in the thick of it. A lot of our members, they are hospital workers, they're
Yeah.
professionals, and they're surrounded by people who are running syndications, who are
Yeah.
capital raisers, and it's really interesting and enticing to get in on those deals because it's like, okay, I need to put 25,000 into the deal or
Mhm.
50,000 into the deal. Some of our members are accredited investors. Most of them are, meaning for those who aren't acquainted, you meet a threshold that the IRS has in place for income and net worth. Some are new grads who aren't quite there yet
Mhm.
and they're saddled with a whole lot of student loan debt, right?
Yeah.
But you're in the thick of it. And instead of, I guess, putting all your ducks in a row to try to invest in one of those bigger deals, you decide, you know what, I want to do it myself. I want
Yeah.
to have full control. I want to take full responsibility and do it myself. Could we unpack that for a moment? Because there are
Yeah.
people who are thinking, you know what, I want a hands-off experience. Somebody just take the wheel. And we're seeing a lot of, I would say, challenges right now
Right.
with those who invested in those types of multifamily funds, especially with the interest rates that were floating. So I know
Right.
we're getting really complicated, but I think this conversation needs to be had.
Totally. Yeah. It was the firm that I worked for, they put together funds with we called them neighborhood shopping centers, which is a
Oh.
very nice way of saying strip malls. So when you think about a place that you would go to get your hair cut, get your nails done, get your dry cleaning done, and then buy a bottle of wine,
Mhm.
those were the centers. So they did
Gotcha.
well. They're still doing well, but they're a very conservative base, which is good for what some people are looking for.
Mhm.
We wanted something more active so we could actually take a little bit more control and we could take more risks when we wanted to take more risks. We could pull back when we wanted to pull back and
Yeah.
we could just see a little bit more behind the curtain, right? And
Mhm.
also, anytime you're in a syndication or you're in a fund or you're in something that rolls up, right? You pay for it, right? Like there's profits at every level. So in my mind, I was like, I don't feel like losing out on that cut of the profit, right? If we're going to do this, I want to do it in a way that's sustainable and very
Yeah.
efficient. So that's why we've gotten very particular about setting up our systems, especially since we both do work full time and we have kids and we have a very active lifestyle. Um, but it was just important that we could take some control of things, because when stuff happens like interest rates or
Mm,
commercial real estate, like it might shift, or you have something like COVID, right?
yeah.
You're no longer in control of all of those things in the market. So to also not be in control of any of the decisions was something that I didn't love.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to maybe having a mix of it. I
Yeah.
think
For
there's
sure.
always a balance, right, of having some of it that's just kind of working in the background and you don't have to have any active management in. But I think there's
Yeah.
also another part of like, when you look at the most successful people in the world, they're not sitting back and letting other people make all of the decisions. They're being
Mm.
active in their own life.
Ooh, that part.
I just got
Yes,
deep.
100%.
Yeah.
No, you're 100% correct because my audience, they tend to go towards the, hey, I want to have complete control, right?
Right.
However, when it comes to real estate, we're kind of taking a back seat, but I would encourage you to look at, well, what aspects of real estate can you continue to take control in? You don't want to have 100% of your ducks in the passive bucket. There is some benefit with the active bucket as well, and we just had amazing podcast guests that talked about the tax benefits associated with
Mhm.
having participated some
Yeah.
and taking control. So that's out there if you're active as well. So that's really
Yeah.
really good.
And the goals of a fund or a syndication aren't
Hmm.
always gonna be aligned with your personal goals, right?
Exactly.
I think that's
Hmm.
also really important, is that you can pivot very, very quickly if you're the one that's kind of leading the mission, right? Like I
Yeah.
mentioned, we just sold it used to be our primary residence. So it was our first investment property kind of by chance.
Hmm.
And we sold it because we wanted to avoid capital gains. Now, had that
Yeah.
been in a portfolio, it would have made a lot of sense to keep that in the portfolio because it was performing really well. And there would have been no real reason to take it out. But you can do a lot more things that will help your personal goals when you are in charge.
Love that. Love that. So for the individual Katie who's thinking to themselves, okay, that's fine and dandy. I want to take control, but it's so expensive to invest in my own backyard. I know you've perfected the out-of-state investing strategy with properties in Iowa and in
Yeah.
Colorado. Could you talk to that a little bit? What are some of the key things that we need to take into consideration when we're managing properties remotely? How do we make sure that those go well? Is it possible to manage
Yeah.
remotely?
Oh my gosh, it's so possible. In a way, it's kind of easier because it forces you to outsource things that you shouldn't be spending your time doing, right? It really is. I will say that 11 of our properties are in Iowa. We have one property in Colorado where I'm at, and we have
Nice.
one property in Florida that we're working on offloading. So, we only have one property. I have one property within 12 hours of me for driving.
Wow.
Now I think a couple of the key things are midterms in general, because we don't have a constant turnover, right? And
Yeah,
that's been huge for us. Like once I get someone in there and I get them settled, they're good for a few months, right?
yeah.
And the tenant types are fantastic. Like they're very responsible, they're very reliable, they're fantastic at communication, they're very patient. Like if the dishwasher breaks, they're not anticipating that the dishwasher gets fixed that evening. They know that sometimes this stuff takes time.
Yeah.
One key has been that I am very fortunate that my family lives in Iowa, and that's kind of why we were drawn to it. Was my backyard was too expensive in Denver. Their backyard is not. Um, but just having one or two people that you know and you can rely on if you need someone there, right? Someone, if it's like, oh man, this person, for some reason the lockbox isn't there. Can you go get the keys? Or I need an extra key, just someone who, not even in case of emergency, but just kind of in case of a day-to-day need. It doesn't happen frequently. But we have 11 properties there, and there's probably a couple times a month where I'm calling on my family like, hey, I need you to do X, I need you to do Y. And it takes 20 minutes of their time. But just having someone, that
Yeah.
can be your cleaner, that can be your friend from high school, that can be a college kid who might want to do something for 25 bucks, right?
Mhm.
And the other thing I think is just kind of getting to know the area, right? Don't pick a random place on the map, and don't pick somewhere because it was on a list of Bigger Pockets top 10 places to invest. Like invest somewhere where you know if it's a good street or not a good street, and not based on all the data, but also just because you know that area or because you know someone who you trust who knows that area. Like, pick somewhere that you know the facts that you can't find online, right?
Mm.
That's gonna give you a lot of insights.
Love that. Love that. And just to piggyback on that, there are tools like TaskRabbit or Thumbtack where you can find
Mhm.
errand runners to help you out. One tool that's been really pivotal for us over the last year has been leveraging Instacart to order a
Mm.
blow dryer and just send it to the property, right? And
Yeah, Walmart
so
Plus. I love Walmart Plus.
I
I use
haven't
it all the time.
tapped into Walmart Plus yet. I need to.
I mean, it's pretty much the same thing as Instacart, but
Hmm.
it's just through
Yeah.
the store, and you can get something there, like, within a 2 hours. It's so nice.
Everything is figureoutable. There are
Yes.
tools out there. We're in a what is it? The sharing economy. There are people
Yep.
out there who wants to deliver your goods to the property
Yep.
if needed. So
Yep.
it's tapping into those apps. Many members of our community, they're running their property with their cell phone. 90% of their entire
Mhm.
management is with their cell phone. So if my trauma surgeon and my ER doctors can do it, you can do it too because they're very,
Yes.
very busy. Okay,
Yes, and
so
it's
let's
like
talk.
setting your
Oh, go
tenants
ahead.
up for sorry, it's just about, like, setting your tenants up for success and setting expectations too. I think that's another thing,
Yeah,
especially with out of state, is like, okay, your dishwasher is broken. Okay, I'm not gonna, like, if you text me at 10 p.m., I'm not gonna reply until the next morning, and I'll get
yeah.
it fixed in an appropriate time frame. That doesn't mean I'm gonna drag my feet forever, but everything is, just keeping it reasonable.
And that's so good that you mentioned that because with short-term rental versus midterm rental, yes, we have a different avatar and a different expectation level.
Mhm.
With short-term rentals, a lot of those guests, if they're staying in your property for 2, 3 days, you got to be really snappy with those repairs and those maintenance requests because most of their vacation is going to be spent dealing with that specific request and dealing with that
Mhm.
issue. However, for the midterm rental guests, the biggest advantage is that they're there longer, so you have an opportunity to work with them during normal business hours, where you're not rushing in the middle of the night, like Katie just shared. To get those repairs completed because that
Yep.
comes with a premium. And I got to tell you, my operating costs, the amount it costs me to run my midterm rentals is less than half of what it cost me to run my short-term rentals. And part
Oh,
of
yeah.
that bucket is your those maintenance, those quick turnaround maintenance repairs. So definitely another plus. Something you mentioned a little bit earlier that I did want to circle back and touch on, Katie, was the different tenant types. I typically call that my different midterm rental avatars. So I focus primarily on the displaced families, those insurance policy holders who have encountered a catastrophe at their home, and they then have to move into my home that's fully furnished, and they stay there for months and months and months, and while their home is getting repaired. I know you mentioned travel nurses, but there are so many others out there. Could we explore that a little bit for the community to get the wheels turning on who else out there that's a tenant type that would need a furnished month to
Yeah.
month rental?
There's a lot, and I will be the first one to say that, like, that was one of the surprises to me in this industry is how many different tenant types or avatars there are. The from the very start of my time at Furnished Finder, I was like, "Okay, I understand the travel nurse thing. I get that. They need somewhere to go for 3
Everyone
months."
thinks it's just travel nurses. Let me
Right.
just
I'm like,
interject,
"Okay."
right?
Yes, they do. Because that's when we all understand. It's like, "Okay,
Mhm.
I get that." Like, you're going to a hospital for 3 months or 6 months. I get that. The other ones, I feel like it goes back to something I try to remember in my own life, which is, like, not everybody's like me, right? And I think by default as humans, we always assume that, like, what my life is your life is everybody's life. And, you forget if you have kids and not everybody has kids, or if you don't have kids, like, vice you can put it on every aspect of your life, right? But sometimes you can have grandparents who wanna just go be near their grandkids during the summer. Or you can have someone who's going for a medical treatment
Yeah,
and they need to be close to a specialized hospital for
yeah.
for multiple months. I actually just had at one of my properties someone who is recovering from a kidney transplant and they live more in the rural
Mm.
area. They needed to be closer to the medical facilities. I have someone right now also in another one of my properties who is receiving specialized cancer treatment
Yeah.
so that they are close to the hospital, not to be a travel nurse, but to get the treatment. I've had someone who is staying while their family member was on hospice.
Mm,
And then non-medically, I've had a lot of corporate workers, right? Like, oh, they're gonna go open a new Chick-fil-A, or they're on a
mm.
project, or they're an intern, or they're doing a project for 3 months and it's out of state for them, and they'll rent the place, and then on the weekends they'll go home. I've also had relocations. I've had the insurance claims. Right now, I do have an insurance claim at our largest property. Little
Nice.
girl went to the bathroom in the middle of the night, washed her hands, forgot to close one of the handles, and the sink was clogged with toothpaste because kids' toothpaste is the actual worst thing in the world, and it just solidifies into a goop. And they woke up a few hours later and their house was flooded. So they're in one of our houses. So it's there's uses for so many different things, but I just think we have a tendency where if you're not in a place that you would use one, you don't think about it. But then it's like
Mhm.
we could keep going and going and going with all of the different use types, especially because we all work from home now,
Yeah.
right? I mean, my husband and I have talked about like, well, what if maybe one of these summers we'll rent out our house and then we'll go rent a house somewhere else for the summer and have a cool adventure, right? Like
Yeah.
we work from home. We have this flexibility that really like pre-COVID didn't exist as much, and
Yeah.
people are leaning into that.
Yeah. I love that. And that's for a whole other podcast. Like, how do you set your life up in a way so that you can be a digital nomad and go and
Yeah,
live somewhere else? Yeah. So that is super cool. I love that. All right, so let's talk about how do we maximize our revenue though? Because with midterm rentals, I think one of the biggest misconception is that you just turn it on and it happens overnight.
right.
That's not always the case. So
No.
what I have found that's been really beneficial is our members leveraging both the short-term rental strategy and midterm rentals simultaneously. Can we talk
Mhm.
about can we talk about that for a moment? And what are some specific scenarios or market conditions that you think that the combination works the best?
Yeah, I think it works really well if you, have a property in a very seasonal environment.
Mm.
Obviously, if you have a time where you're gonna get a lot more revenue doing it short term, fantastic, like, do it all day, every day.
Mhm.
I think what's important there is that and I don't know how you think about this, but in my mind, it's a switch that you flip. You can't try to be a successful midterm host and short-term host at the same time. Like your calendar is never going to just magically work out where you have a 42-day gap and then you get a 33-day booking. Like it doesn't happen, right? So you pick like what's your primary strategy? And
Yeah.
if it's short term, you take short term. And then
Mhm.
once you switch, maybe it's off season or maybe there was a large, let's say you live in Florida and there was a big hurricane that just came through. Maybe that's the time to switch to midterm and you can get some insurance housing. But in that case, it's kind of like you need to focus on midterms and set your minimum stay for 30 days. And then if you
Yeah.
have a gap between midterms, then you squeeze in the short term. So there's so much success. I just think you have to be intentional with it, right? You have to like choose like how is this going to work? What am I going to prioritize? What is going to maximize my revenue here and maximize really like what you're like the housing solutions you're offering, right? Cuz in
Yeah.
general, you're going to make more money when you solve a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Um
Oh,
so
yeah.
how are you able to do that? And then like you can't try to do everything at once, but, like, you have to at least decide which way you're gonna steer the boat at once.
Oh, so good. Okay. Absolutely love that. You dropped so many gems there. I know another avatar that we serve in some of those vacation rental markets where the seasonality that is there are the snowbirds, aka the
Yes.
climate migrants. So, very, very good pointers there. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so for the
Yeah.
listeners, again, who are just tuning in and are like, okay, that's great and all, but where would I list my property to get started. And so,
Yeah.
for those of you sitting in the back, guys, this is the answer to your question. We have, of course, Katie here from Furnished Finder. We want to talk a little bit more about the Furnished Finder platform, which has been the go-to for midterm rental housing. They collect an extraordinary amount of data that we can use and tap into to understand our market. So, can we talk a little bit about Furnish Finder? And I know that based on your CEO's presentation this year, there are so many things that you guys are putting into place, so many changes. You're receiving our feedback on how to make
Yes.
things better and easier for use. But yeah, let's tap into that a little bit.
Yeah, so Furnished Finder is the largest marketplace for midterm rentals. So it's the platform where like that's all we do is midterm rentals. Um, it's really great also because we have kind of flipped the business model on its head. So instead of, you go to Airbnb or Verbo or a lot of these websites and you list your property for free, but then when you get a booking, they take a cut of it and it's usually significant, like 10 to 15%. We have flipped the script on that. So you're going to pay a low subscription price to list your property. And then you're going to get unlimited tenant leads. You're going to connect with tenants in however many different ways possible. You can assign as many leases as you want, and you can do it all on your terms, right? So it really is, it's the booking model is direct between you and the tenant versus having this middleman in there that's really there to take a significant chunk. And what I wish people would realize is I think a lot of people say, "Oh, well, the amount that these platforms charge me as a landlord is pretty small. The traveler pays most of it." It's like, "Okay, true, but they have one budget." Right? You don't go on vacation saying, "Okay, well, I have a $3,000 budget for lodging and I have $1,000 budget for fees." It's you have a $4,000 budget. So if you're able, and that's the same for a midterm rental traveler, right? So if you're able to house someone, it's more of that money is going to go to you as the landlord and the property owner. And we just think it creates a better relationship, right? Because it's directly between the two of you and you can connect and you can negotiate, you can sign leases, you can do tenant screenings. So everything to feel really secure because midterms are just different, right? So it's really important that you list your property on Furnished Finder, get on there, get active. Now, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from listing your property on other sites as well. I'm in marketing, right? So I am completely of the mindset of if you have a good product, and in this case, your midterm rental is your good product, like put it everywhere. Why wouldn't you? Right.
Yeah.
But Furnished Finder, travelers come to Furnished Finder for midterm rentals and only for midterm rentals. So it's really great because everybody on there is looking for what you have, right? But it's also important that, midterm rentals are a relationship business. So it's not transactional like short term, it's relationship. So people often have questions or they want to hear more about your property before they book it, or maybe they want to talk to you or things like that. It's much more of a relationship business, so it's important to get in there and connect with some leads, connect with all of those potential tenants, and see if there's a fit.
I love that, Katie. And so I struggle, full transparency. I struggled in the past with a Furnish Finder 1.0. And I know that, again, you guys are making great strides with Furnish
Yeah.
Finder 2.0. So for those who have struggled in the past and they're like, okay, maybe I should be looking at this again because I'm looking to get more of that visibility with people who are looking for
Mhm.
midterm rental housing, could you share with us one or two best practices, tips, and tricks to make sure we're getting the most out of
Yeah.
our mid Furnish Finder subscription? Because again, guys, this is a platform where you pay up front once and you're done. They're not eating away at every
Yes.
single booking. So I think that is one of the biggest values out there. So how do we take advantage and make sure we're using the platform at the highest level? One or two best practices
Yeah.
or golden tips.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is to like get in there and make sure you're putting your best foot forward. Get your amazing professional pictures on there. Make sure all your
Mhm.
amenities are included. Make sure that you talk about in your description, like, is it safe? What location is it at? Is there parking? Think about what you would think about as a traveler if if you were staying somewhere for 2 or 3 months, not a weekend, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just a different it's a different set of needs. But definitely, you want to get in there. You want to make sure everything is up to date and accurate. You want to make sure your calendar availability is huge for these
Yeah.
travelers, right? So if your calendar
Mm.
availability is out of date, that's a huge hurdle that's going to get in your way. But we did get a new CEO last year that you've had the privilege of meeting, and he's fantastic. And with him came a whole team, and we have just
Mm.
exploded the team. We have so many great people now, and like we are doing so much cool stuff behind the scenes. And everything you guys say is happening, right? Like our team has gotten a lot bigger, but we are still small and we are still at the point where we are listening to what we're hearing and we're directly implementing it, right? So especially me, like I am a landlord and I'm on the team. So when I'm looking at like a draft of like, we just redid our property details page, for example, which is when you go in and you look at a property, what shows up on the display. And I'm like, wait, but let's change that and that and that because our travelers want A, B, and C, and our landlords want A, B, and C. Like, I'm like an insider, right? So
Yeah.
it's like we are really hearing you, and we know the potential that's in this market and this industry, and we are working our buns off to make sure that we can help earn every midterm rental landlord the most money as possible in the least amount of time.
I love that. So
Yeah.
you're also helping us to solve the occupancy and vacancy
Yeah.
uh, dynamic as well, which is phenomenal. Okay,
Yeah.
so one thing that a few members of our community, I have a gal who just reached out and she just joined our community. She's an engineer, and she said, you know what? I want to purchase next year, but I need a strategy to help me to build up my cash reserves to get that in motion. And what we recommended to her was a midterm rental arbitrage. So
Mm.
can we talk about that for a
You know I
moment?
have a sweet spot in my heart for arbitrage.
Yes.
You know I do. Actually, we
Mhm.
just sold one of the properties we own, so let's
Mhm.
see. I think well, that's we have 13. We only own 2 of those.
Oh, okay. Now I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah, we arbitrage a lot because
Interesting.
even in the Midwest where properties are less expensive, it's still like a lot of money to get going.
Mhm.
You gotta
Yeah.
put a down payment and you have all the furniture, like, it's still a lot. So, we have utilized arbitrage massively. We
Okay,
arbitrage
so let's
everything
let's
from a
define it
student.
for the people
Yeah,
first. Let's break that down first.
so
What is midterm rental arbitrage?
I always describe arbitrage as I don't own a lot of these properties, but I partner with the owners. They know exactly what I'm doing. I rent from them. I take very good care of their properties, better than any tenant would take care of their properties. Then I furnish the properties specifically for midterm rental tenants and rent it out to a midterm tenant. So,
Love that.
in its most simple form, it's I rent, I furnish, I rent. But there's really more to that because there has to be that partnership aspect where, like, you are creating a lot of value for the property owner.
Love that. Love
Yeah,
that.
so we rent everything from a studio apartment to a four-bed house.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Wonderful. No, I love that because again, this is a scenario where say someone doesn't have the 10% down payment, the
yeah,
20% down payment.
yeah,
This is a great way to start with first month's rent and a
yep,
deposit, and you're in there. And although we don't arbitrage a lot of our properties, but we have stumbled into arbitrage ourselves. Imagine getting an insurance reaching out to you saying, Rachel, I need your property ASAP and I'm willing to pay a premium. And I'm looking at them like, your company just rented my property out for 13 months. What are you talking about?
right,
Am I going to say no? No, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to clarify. Did you just say premium? Excuse me? I don't hear those terms every day.
right,
So what does Rachel do? Rachel arbitrages to get a property stood
yep,
up in 72 hours to make it happen for
yeah,
that insurance guest to come in and stay in the property for the next 6 months, 8 months, depending on the length of that renovation. So arbitrage is the key. I truly think
Yeah.
it's the key to unlocking another revenue stream, and making sure you have the right tools in your tool chest to make this happen. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean, if it were up to me, I would own every single one of our
Of
properties, but
course.
we have gone fast and there's only so much capital in the bank.
Yeah.
But for us, it's also been a really good way to test different submarkets,
You get to
right? To be
date
like,
them a little bit,
you
right?
do, you totally get to date them. And it's like, oh, I wonder if we could do another 2 bed. Let's arbitrage one. It's very low risk, right? A lot of
Mhm.
times people ask me, well, what if it doesn't work out? I'm like, well, then I move the furniture. Like, no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
It's the least permanent form of real estate investing, and it does. It lets you date the market, date the property, um, and make sure that it really is going to fit the goals that you want, and it can help you snowball some cash to purchasing more properties. So, I think it's fantastic, and I also think it's great for some of these properties that we arbitrage for midterms are harder properties for landlords to rent for long terms because they might be
Yeah.
studios or one beds. But for midterms, they're great.
I love that. I was just on a call a little bit earlier, and that question came up, and there was a property sitting there on Zillow for 108 days
Oh my
that
gosh.
was just still sitting there, and it looked like it was in great condition. And so
Yeah.
I love those properties that have been sitting there for a while. If you're looking to arbitrage, reach out to those
Yeah.
landlords. It was listed by the owner, and so, yeah, there's a little bit of, I would say there was a desperation energy there, but you're
Mhm.
here to provide a service because, like Katie mentioned a little bit earlier, you are the asset. You are
Yeah.
going to take such great care of that property, better than a tenant, better than a
Mhm.
long term tenant. And so even I go to my short term rentals when I want to be in a clean, perfect home to live. But it's like, get away from
Yeah.
the rental because my actual house, guys, full transparency, is a hot mess. So
Isn't it
whenever I
funny
want
how, like, on screen it's, like, cute? I'm like, "If only you guys saw this
to just
side."
move the camera a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little sloppier over here, but we're
Right.
entrepreneurs, that's how our brain is. It's just like,
Oh my
"Oh,
goodness. Just
ooh."
don't look to the left or to the right. Let's
Yeah,
just focus
but
straight on, right? But that's how it is
you
because you're living in it, right? It's lived
yeah,
in. But the
yeah,
rentals that Katie and I were talking about, our rental properties, it has to be showroom ready every single
yes,
time. How many tenants are going to keep your house showroom ready? They're just not. But we would, because our
yes,
business hinges on the fact that the homes are in tippy top shape. So
yep.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Actually, you hit the nail on the head too with the finding the properties to arbitrage that are harder to rent out. The single family home that we arbitrage right now, I had actually, called and pitched it to the person and they passed. And then I saw it got rented. And then a couple weeks later it was back for rent. And I was like,
Excuse me.
and I was like, ring a ding dong. And I called and I was like, so now you want to talk to me? And we went to coffee, and that's part of it is you can't be afraid to pick up the phone. I know it's 2024. Everybody wants
Yeah,
to email or they want to Slack or they want to DM. Like, pick up the
the
phone. Pick
phone,
pick up the banana
yes.
phone, like, pick up the phone, right? We went to coffee, and I explained it more to the property manager, right? Because there was an actual property management company that had taken
Oh,
over this property, because the
mhm,
owners actually moved out of the country. And I was
got
like,
it.
"Why what happened?" He explained that they've had a hard time renting it because it has a small yard that backs up to other yards. It's kind of a funky layout. The basement isn't finished, and I was like, "I actually don't care about any of that. What I care
Yeah,
about is you have a garage, you're in a good school district, there
yeah,
is a fenced yard. I don't care if it's small. I care that
yeah,
there's a fenced yard. There's, 4 bedrooms, there's a private office." I was like, "That's what I care about for my target tenant," right?
yeah,
So it really was a win-win, but I think that the key to arbitrage is you can't just come in like asking, 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 and acting like they're doing you
mhm.
a favor. Like it truly is a like this is good for everybody type of scenario.
Yeah, so that's good because so if we could unpack that for a second, it's not like a forever home. Your
Right.
guests are not anticipated to stay there for a year or 2 years. It's
Right.
3 months or 2
Yeah.
months or yeah, so I love that. So when you spoke with the property manager though, was it one of those large conglomerate property management companies, or was it a smallish? Because I
No, it
find
was
that
a lo
the lar it was go ahead.
it was pretty local. Now the
Yeah, I
one
love
of the
that.
partners that we have in Iowa, they're a slightly larger company.
Mhm.
I'd say they're probably like mid-size as they're still local, like, it's just, like, within that state, but they do have a pretty significant portfolio, and they do development and all different types of real estate, but that partnership has developed so much where just the level of trust there is, my contact there will send me a unit. I'll be like, "Hey, do you want this one?" "Yes, I do. Thank you." Done. And it's just the point where it's even unspoken. Like they know that we're good tenants. We know that they're going to be good to us, and it really is a give and take without any BS. Like it's helping them just as much as it's helping us.
I love that, and you've already given us some tips and tricks on what those conversations are looking like and who to look for. So for those who are just
Yeah.
tuning in, working with a local property manager or a landlord is far more superior than working with a huge conglomerate
Oh
type
yeah.
of property management company. Their legal team is filled up to the hilt, and so
No.
it's
Yeah.
really challenging to navigate those. So I just skip those.
Yep.
So grab that gem and put it in your pocket and execute on it. All right, Katie, it's time for the rapid fire Q&A. I hope you're ready to tackle these 3 questions that we ask at the very end of our episodes. We
I'm
started
ready.
this not too long ago, and so I've been having a lot of fun learning from all of our guests. Can you share a moment where you felt completely burnt out and how you overcame it?
Oh man. Just recently my husband left his full-time job
Mhm.
to run our portfolio, which has been amazing. But just prior to that, I was fried at all ends and I didn't even like him anymore. And I love my husband
Oh.
so much. And I like my husband so much. Like we're best friends. I didn't even like him. I mean, we were both burnt out at both ends. So
Yeah.
it was, we were doing so much, and we also just didn't have our processes in a good place. So it was just kind of, not only did we take a little bit of a leap of faith and say, okay, if we're gonna do this, let's do this. And he's
Mhm.
now running the rentals, but it also was okay. We're not gonna grow anymore for a while, which is really hard for him and I. Like, no more properties. We have to get all of the systems in place. We have to get anything that can be automated. And we just had to hit pause for a while. And I think
Yeah.
hitting pause, in you're saying it and in theory, and then quite literally like going outside and taking some walks and spending time with the kids and just taking a break, because at the end of the day, nothing's that serious that we're doing here. It's just real estate. It's just houses and couches and toasters. Like, it's all going to be fine.
I love that. Hitting pause and in a world where we compare doors as like a big chest puffing ego
Yeah.
boost, being able to step back and say, you know what? Less is more.
Yeah.
Let's hit pause and work on the quality of our systems instead of
Yep.
this run quantity. This is
Yep.
you're in the right place if that is resonating with you, because that resonates with me. Thank you so much for sharing, Katie.
Yeah.
What's a book or a resource that completely changed your perspective on life or work?
I love The Gap and the Gain. I just finished this
Ooh.
book. My husband read it and I listened to it, and now I think I'll probably read it too. But I think in today's world, we are always comparing to what we want to be or what we think we could be, or like what's our next goal,
Mm.
or what's next. And that's actually why I put these pictures behind me. These are all of our properties. And it's not
Mm.
just to like be like, "Oh, look what we've done." Blah blah. It's more to be like, okay, if we're having a hard day, if we've hit a struggle, if we have a property that's not doing very well, because we don't talk about those a lot, but that happens. Like, real estate's not perfect. That it's like, okay, take a minute and sit back and just look how far you've come.
Yes.
Look at the things that you have achieved.
Yes.
Like, and just take a second and be proud of yourself. I think there's something with our generation where it's very weird to say I'm proud of myself,
Yeah.
but if you can feel that, it just instantly like takes some relief. So that book was a really big mind shift for me, and I like
Yeah.
that it's not all floof. They actually have some like actionable steps in there. Um So yeah, I really like that book and would highly, highly recommend it.
So good. That's the book by Dan Kennedy and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. It's
Yep.
amazing. And it's
So
not a
good.
long read either.
No,
So, yeah.
no, it's a
I
good
love
airplane read.
listening. Oh, go ahead.
It's a good airplane read.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love listening because it was like interview style for
Yes.
portions of it. So I appreciate a good podcast. I feel like, oh, this is like a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awesome. I love that one.
So good. And I know our audience will resonate with it because they're overachievers.
Yes.
Ladies, I know you. I see you. I'm talking to
Yes.
you. And how
Yeah.
often do you take a step back and look and see, like Katie just said, look at how far I've come. But we're
Yep.
always looking forward, like, okay, I've got this other goal to hit and this next goal to hit. And so
It's
let's
very
take a beat.
cultural, right? Like even at school, like I have my
Mm-hmm.
son just started middle school this year, and they started in 100% and it's down from there. Even if they get an A plus, it's a 98 and they're 2 points from the top, right? They
Wow.
don't
Yeah.
start from 0 and get all the way up. So it's built into us wherever we
Yeah.
go. So it's
Yeah.
like there's always more to do. There's always more goals to reach.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, just take a second and realize what you've done.
Love that. Oh, good recommendation. What is the craziest real estate story you've heard or experienced?
Oh man, I've heard a lot of stories. I've heard a lot of stories. Thankfully, most of them don't apply to midterms. I mean, I feel like midterms are like, quite honestly, like they're like the boring way to
Yes.
invest in real
Let
estate.
it
Cause like,
be boring, bro.
right.
Like,
And like
let it be
typically
boring.
ours are boring. I was a wedding photographer in my past life.
Oh, nice.
And I have many more stories of that than I do real estate. But when I was at the commercial real estate investment firm, we did have like we had one time a car that just drove through the property,
Oh
like just
my
drove into a Hallmark store. Like they
gosh.
just were intoxicated or something and
Oh.
didn't
Mhm.
remember which side the gas was on. That was really interesting. That's probably like I remember sitting in a staff meeting and one of the property managers going, "So, a car went into Hallmark last night." So, commercial real estate is a different beast. But yeah, thankfully midterms are boring and I really, really like boring properties. They're
Oh
great.
my goodness. Too good, too good. Well, guys, this wraps up our session for today. My goodness, Katie, I would love for you to let the people know what are some of the best ways to connect with you, connect with Furnished Finder. We're going to add all of the links in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely reach out and connect on Furnished Finder. We're on Instagram at Furnished Finder and at the Landlord Diaries Pod for the podcast. We have a Facebook group too. If you just search Furnished Finder and then hit groups, you'll find us. That's really valuable. Our podcast is called the Landlord Diaries. My Instagram account is Ms. Katie Lyon. I always tell people I'm like, I post just about real estate as I do my pets and my kids. So just, know what you're signing up for. But I do love to connect. I get messages all the time about like, hey, I'd love to hear kind of your thought process on this or how are you doing this? And I ask for like Rachel knows this. I've asked her before, like, hey, how do you like, can you help me with this situation or that situation? So that's like one of my favorite parts about being in the real estate world is that everybody genuinely cares and will help you. So, I love just being a part and just being any assistance because I get it too.
Love that. Well, Katie, thank you for joining us today. This has been so insightful. I cannot wait for you all to dive in. Send me a comment on Instagram, wherever you find us sharing this episode. Let us know what you're going to put into action after listening to this amazing episode. Thank you again for tuning in to today's episode of the Luxury Rental Doctor Show. It was such a pleasure having Katie with us, just sharing all of the invaluable insights and giving us the heads up on what's coming down the pike with Furnished Finder. So keep that on your radar. Once you have launched your property, be sure to sign up for that platform as one of your top options to make sure that you're getting the visibility that you need
Yeah.
for your property to keep it booked. All right, well, that's it. Dr. Rachel here signing out and wishing you smart investments and great success. Love you all to the moon. Bye-bye for now.